He is so much more sophisticated as a politician in 2024 than he ever was in 2016.
Wow, is this kind of a blast from the past? Cory Lewandowski, a name that many of us know from just a couple of years ago during the Trump presidency. Is this an official welcome back, Cory?
Well, I don't know if I was ever dead. Many people said that they've written my obituary, but I'm still here and still part of the Trump team. So it's great to be back here.
Listen, I'm not in the business of writing obituaries. We're not doing that, at least not for the next few minutes here on the show. Okay, so when you go back to 2016, you were the campaign manager for Donald Trump, correct?
I was the first employee hired in 2015. It was a little bit like starting Google, right? You start off as the single employee, and then you grow an organization to what turned into hundreds and then ultimately thousands of people. And we started in 2015 early. We ended up spending about 350 or $360 million in 2016 and $1.2 billion on the campaign in 2020. So it tells you how quickly things ramped up and then how they come back down to reality. And now we're ramping back up for the 2024 race.
Unbelievable. So when you go back to 2015, I was talking to Laura Trump recently, and she talked about, and actually to Lynn Patton as well, and they talked about when he came down, the Golden Escalator, like in 2015, and the big announcement. Like, take me back to that moment for you.
It was amazing because Donald Trump likes to say that we planned this in 15 minutes. I spent 5 months planning that Golden Escalator ride. Spent the whole weekend in New York writing a speech, which was perfectly timed out to like 8 minutes and 20 seconds. I remember just before he came down that escalator, I went up to the 25th floor of Trump Tower where his office was, and I handed him the speech, and he put it in his pocket, never to be seen from again, and obviously went down and delivered, what became a very iconic speech. And I went up to his office that day, June 16th. We were going to do it on his birthday, June 14th, but it was a Sunday. So we waited till the Tuesday. And it was just him and Mrs. Trump in the office. And I said, sir, it's time to go. We were going to do an announcement at 11 o'clock in the morning that day. And Melania Trump looked at him and she said, if you run, you will win. You always win, Donald. And he literally looked into his mirror, took a puff out of his chest and just went, okay, let's go. And didn't give it one more second of thought, came down the escalator, and the rest, they say, is history. But that's how much preparation Donald Trump had. And I equate it to, a great athlete. This guy was just a different level of politician because he was a politician and he was ready to go. And then he took the world by storm, and he's been doing it for almost 10 years since.
Unbelievable. I like the insight that you're giving us there on Melania too, because obviously we don't hear much from her, but how much do you think he took to heart what she said at that moment?
Oh, it was a very precious moment because it was just three of us in the room there. And really, I think that, look, this is a man who'd been in the spotlight for a long time, but never to this level. Never to every camera in the world following everything you do. And he was hot when he was in New York real estate and had The Apprentice and all these other great things. But when you're running for president and then you're the front runner, right? The world is very different than, we saw what the media has done to some of the people around him. But, I think what he did was he tried to prepare his family, who was an apolitical family, for this, but there was no preparation like doing it. And Melania Trump, as the world now knows, is a very private person, an incredibly smart person. And she didn't weigh in often, but when she did, you better pay attention because when she says something, she means it.
So he takes that big, deep breath and he, again, tucks that speech in. I wonder if he has it somewhere, if he just tore up all of your hard work.
He has it somewhere, I think. I don't know. I've got so many great mementos of the things that I had the chance to be next to him for, whether it was the vetting of the vice presidential candidates, the budgeting for the campaign, so many documents he had to sign that I have to get the only copy of, his credentials for all the Republican presidential debates and the general election debates. These one-off things that someday, people will look at and say, wow. A lot of people have had the privilege and chance to meet Donald Trump, but I get to know Donald Trump. I've spent thousands, tens of thousands of hours with him flying around the country and around the world. And, I'm so grateful and, thankful for what he's done for me and my family and more so for the country.
So I want to go a little deeper on Donald in a moment, but let me just make clear, because in 2016 and then after that, you were the campaign manager. What is your role today? What's your role now that you're back?
So look, I'm officially over helping as a senior advisor to the Republican convention, which is next week, where Donald Trump is officially going to accept the Republican Party's nomination. I've been flying around with Donald Trump for almost 10 years on the plane. I flew up to the debate with him last Thursday night to Atlanta. I was down on Palm Beach with him preparing for his debate, and then went to the debate with him. And so, I've had this amazing privilege to be a very small part of history, but to have a front row seat at it. And so, as we've seen staff come and go, and myself included here and there, I consider myself a friend of the president. I hope he considers me a friend as well.
Well, honestly, it seems like he does, or else he would not have brought you back. And I do think we need to address the elephant in the room here, Cory, because it was public, right? What happened in 2021 when the Trump campaign, Trump world, as they said, dismissed you from the Political Action Committee, MAGA, Make America Great Again, of course. And this is after the allegations that you made unwanted sexual advances towards a donor. And to me, what really stood out was the quote that the Trumps put out after when they decided to dismiss you, and it was that he will no longer be associated with Trump world. And now you're back. First of all, would you like to say anything about the circumstances surrounding your dismissal?
Yeah, that whole thing was very unique. It was a situation where the individual who accused me of this was obviously, and it's not been public. Her and her husband have since divorced. He was the one who pushed for this to happen. Without making too many disparaging but factual comments, he has a record of alcohol and drug abuse. She has come out and publicly disavowed him since that incident allegedly occurred. And it was really him who really wanted this to try and destroy me because he wanted to be close to Trump. And so, listen, I understand it, but my relationship with Mr. Trump, candidate Trump, President Trump, post-President Trump, now candidate Trump again, has never changed. We've always had a great, honest relationship. I'm someone who tells him the truth. He tells me the truth. I don't need to be next to him every single day to know that I continue to support him. But look, this is a cutthroat business, and sure, I'm not the only guy who's been fired. I could go through a litany of people who've been fired from the Trump world. The difference is it's how you handle that, right? And I don't think that anybody in the president's family or his friends who I've gotten to know over the years ever thinks I've been anything ever but loyal to President Trump, which is not to be said for a lot of the people who claim to be Trump supporters or Trump friends or people who've worked for him in the past. And so, look, it's easy to be a friend when you're at the pinnacle of power. It's a lot harder when they say that you won't be part of it. And look, a campaign is a big business. There's a lot of people who make a lot of money when $1 billion runs through a campaign. Paul Manafort was fired. Brad Parscale was fired. The truth is, Susie Wiles was fired, who's now the campaign manager from the 2020 campaign. And so, being fired from somewhere, I don't think is something that's a negative. It gives you an opportunity to go and do something else, something
Sure.
different. And look, Michael Bloomberg was fired, and he did pretty well on his own after he left, his last company, and Bernie Marcus and so many others. So look, it's
But
an
why did
opportunity.
they fire you, Cory? What was the reasoning for them firing you?
Look, they said to me, you can't run the super PAC anymore because a donor wanted, for me to be gone in order to continue to make donations. And so, look, that's perfectly fine. It's a decision they made, and I'm perfectly fine with it. The reality is, I still get to travel with the president. I am probably one of 2 or 3 people who have been with him since before he ever came down that escalator, who are still around. That's not a family member. I can count them on one hand, if that many. And so, I'm okay with where I am in this world. I'm proud to have an opportunity to have a role at the convention, to be at a historic event again, to be the chairman of the New Hampshire delegation once again for the 3rd time, to nominate Donald Trump to be an elector for the state of New Hampshire. And more importantly, to be able to pick up the phone and call Mr. Trump, President Trump, candidate Trump, and give him my best advice. And they don't need to pay me to do that. I'll do it because it's the right thing to do, and I'm honored to do it.
Yeah, and listen, I just want to close the loop on that because that all does absolutely make sense. I do think for viewers, for voters out there, when you strike a deal with prosecutors to avoid a misdemeanor charge, and then it was about $1,000 fine. You had to take some sensitivity type training courses, some community service. So when you hear that phrase "struck a deal," and isn't that kind of an acknowledgement of some sort of wrongdoing? Why would you have struck a deal with them if you were innocent?
Well, because here's the problem, and anybody who has been around lawyers know that most of them are vultures. They charge you, $500 to $2,000 an hour in order to get you to bankrupt. We've seen this with Peter Navarro. We've seen it with people across the board who've had to pay attorneys because they've been accused of things. Look, I spent $400,000 of the Corey Lewandowski fund to defend myself against the fake Russia narrative that Donald Trump was a Russian spy, which we know he never was. And so, listen, that's what happens in this world. So you have to make a calculated decision for you and your family. Do you want to continue to fight and pay attorneys and ultimately be vindicated, or at some point, do you want to put this behind you? And what I decided was I'm willing to pay $1,000 fine, take some anger management courses, some impulse control courses, and do some volunteer work and put the whole thing behind me because life is too precious to fight with everybody all the time. Look, I don't mind fighting. I really don't. I think I'm pretty good at it. But at some point, you want to just move on with your life and do the things that are important. And to me, those things are family and making sure that you get to spend time with them. And so that's the decision I made.
Hey everybody, now it's time to talk meat. Yeah, meat. This summer, break away from the meat aisle. Prices are up, as you know, quality is down in the store, and there are more imports than ever. So that means it's time to revolt. Don't buy your meat from China, people, please. GoodRanchers.com is the #1 place to get 100% American meat this summer. Celebrate the sweet taste of freedom with savory meats conveniently delivered right to your front door, and they're all born, raised, and made right here in the good old USA. No matter what the occasion this summer, Good Ranchers has you covered. In fact, right now, you can save on Good Ranchers meat like never before. So please subscribe to any Good Ranchers box now, and you get $100 off and free American Wagyu burgers for an entire year. So yeah, it's more than just a great deal. It's a chance to support American family farms and enjoy the highest quality American meat. All you have to do to claim this offer is go to GoodRanchers.com, subscribe to any of their custom curated boxes filled with 100% American beef, chicken, pork, or wild-caught seafood. So pick your box and use my code SAGE at GoodRanchers.com to claim your $100 off and free Wagyu burgers, again, for an entire year. It's a long time. This is the time to subscribe and leave that low-quality imported meat of the grocery store behind. Don't do that anymore. If you needed any other reason to support Good Ranchers, there are not only amazing partners of my show, but they also support paralyzed veterans of America as well. I'm an Army kid. That means a lot to me. Every order saves American farms and supports American veterans. So change the way you buy meat today at GoodRanchers.com with my code SAGE to claim your $100 off and your free American Wagyu burgers for a year. Make this summer unforgettable with GoodRanchers.com, American meat delivered.
What were the discussions like with Donald Trump himself between the two of you when it was like, okay, let's make this official and bring you back in an official capacity again here in 2024?
Well, it was really interesting because, as much as people think I haven't been around because I don't hang around Mar-a-Lago or Bedminster or, travel with the president all the time. I was at a college football game this year with him. We flew around together for a few days in Iowa and other places. But then he said to me, Corey, you've been such a good supporter of mine. I really want you to have a formal role. And I said, sir, I don't need a formal role, right? I don't need anything, to be honest with you. But his team, Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita, who I've known and worked with for a long time, and Brian Jack before he got elected to be a congressman-elect from Georgia, said, no, we want you to have an official role at the convention. So they approached me at the beginning of this year. And so I've been working with them for a big week, which is next week. And then we'll see what happens after that.
So let's talk a little bit more about the upcoming convention, which is always such a big deal. But I feel like, you tell me, I mean, you've been here before, I have not, but I feel like this is as big as we've ever seen based on a couple of things, right? Based on where the country is right now, as divided as it truly is. The situation certainly with the Democrats, which I'd like to get your opinions on that momentarily, but also just the last 4 years. And Donald Trump, many people thought, okay, he doesn't need to do this anyway. He's done, quote unquote, lost the election, onward. This man has chosen to come back, and it is as intense across the country as ever. Is that fair to say? You're the one that's traveling with him and witnessing all of these crowds.
It's more intense now, I think, than even in 2016. What I witness as I travel around the country is those business owners who 3 years ago wouldn't put a Donald Trump sign in their business for fear of reprisal or, loss of business are fed up. And now up and down the seaboard, the eastern seaboard across this country, when I travel, I see business owners that I didn't even know were Trump supporters having giant signs in their windows. And I think it's because they're just fed up with what the last 3.5 years in the Biden administration have done. So in 2016, we built an army. We built a grassroots army that went out and shocked the world by beating the unbeatable, which was crooked Hillary Clinton and the Democrat establishment. And then in 2020, everybody said Donald Trump couldn't be beat. The campaign was a juggernaut. It was the Death Star. They knew what you had for breakfast before you ate breakfast. They could tell you the color socks you were going to put on before you put them on. Well, guess what? COVID came and completely upended that campaign. And we see now that Joe Biden is sitting in the Oval Office. So in 2024, this campaign's a hybrid. But the 3.5 years of the Biden administration and the economic calamity which has faced America because of his decisions, and the disgusting and terrible withdrawal of our troops from Afghanistan, and the open, porous southern border have brought more people to the Donald Trump bandwagon than ever before.
Mhm.
And that's very evident when you see Donald Trump go to the Bronx, when you see him go to Philadelphia, and tens of thousands of people who have been apolitical their entire lives are coming out and saying, we at least want to hear what Donald Trump has to say. And the polling data, the public polling data says Donald Trump is getting 24% of the African-American vote, 46% of the Hispanic vote. When you compare that in a historical nature, compared to not only 2020, but 2016, Donald Trump is 3 or 4 times higher in each of those categories than he was before, and he was successful in 16. So these numbers are very positive for Donald Trump going into late July and then moving into past Labor Day.
So interesting to me. You mentioned all the places that he's going and how he's polling. It really stood out to me a few weeks ago when he was in Detroit, and he was sitting there with all those pastors, and they said, Barack Obama said he'd come and never came. Joe Biden said he'd come here to the hood and he never came. And you're here. And thank you for being here. And it was almost like just the effort alone means so much to so many people now more than ever. What are you hearing from those people when you're there on site?
Well, it's interesting because I always say Donald Trump is an equal opportunist. He hates everybody the same, right? It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, black or white, green or orange, right? He treats everybody the same, which is what you're supposed to do. And the Donald Trump that I have gotten to know over the course of the last decade is someone who doesn't look at race or ethnicity or socioeconomic status. He sits down and he listens. He's an incredibly good listener. And I think that is overlooked a lot because of his bravado, because of how strong he is. But when you put him in a room with people who have problems, he just listens and he asks thought-provoking questions. And more often than not, if not all of the time, people leave rooms with Donald Trump and say, I can't believe I just had an audience with him and he listened to me.
Yeah.
Joe Biden doesn't do that. Look, I think Bill Clinton did that, had a very good ability to do that. And we haven't seen that. The press doesn't want to talk about that. So when Donald Trump shows up in a historical Black community or in a Black church, or when he's out talking to people that most Republicans haven't attempted to have conversations with, it shocks these people. And the truth is the Democratic Party for probably 60 years has taken the African-American community for granted because they were getting 98 or 99% of the vote and just completely dismissed them. And Donald Trump has completely changed that dynamic, and it scares the Democrats because for a change, Donald Trump treats everyone the same, which means everybody has an equal opportunity in this country to be successful, and that's what's supposed to happen.
Take me back over the last couple of years then, Cory, because as he's not in office, sounds like you did spend a lot of time with him even since 2020. How did he handle watching from afar and not, in his mind, being able to do anything to help the American people when you're watching the economy, when you're watching the fallout, the continued fallout from COVID? And of course, there's certain things I'm sure he would change from how he handled COVID in those first few months since when the pandemic hit. But how did he handle things when it was getting uglier and uglier across this country and he could do nothing but watch?
I'll tell you, I think it was really probably disheartening for him knowing that he was leaving the White House on January 20th of 2021 without the ability to get the credit for the great things he did when he was in office, knowing the pandemic was still transpiring, and knowing that the work wasn't done. And really, when you saw the withdrawal of Afghanistan, Americans left behind and tens of billions of dollars of equipment left behind to be ravaged by our enemies, it just incites Donald Trump because he loves this country. I know he does. I think he has a good heart. I know he does. He cares about people. He wants to make sure our military is taken care of. And, I think a lesser person would have just cowered and curled up like a little baby and sat in the corner, but not Donald Trump. He's a fighter. And he doesn't have to do this job, which is what's the most amazing thing to me. I remember sitting in his office in January of 2015, January 3rd, and he told me about all the reasons why he originally wanted to run for president. I thought he kind of was kidding me. And I said, Mr. Trump, I don't think you or your family or your grandchildren are going to miss a meal. You've got plenty of money. And he said, if I'm not going to step up and do this, then who's going to do it? And if I don't fix it, who are we going to leave it to? These politicians? And he was right. And it takes a strong leader to go through $100 million of legal bills so far because of what the Department of Justice has done to him, what they've done to him in New York, what they're doing to him in Georgia. Another person would just walk away and say, I don't need it, because if Donald Trump didn't announce he was running for president of the United States, again, I firmly believe he wouldn't be prosecuted in any of these cases.
Mm-hmm. January 6th, do you think there's anything in his quiet moments? Is there anything that he would change about what happened that day?
Sure. Look, I think everybody looks back on that day and never wants to see it happen again. I think his message to the January 6th people was go there peacefully and protest, which is within our rights. And, what the media has done as it relates to the January 6th protesters is they put a divide between, if you're a Black Lives Matter protester and you want to burn down police stations and burn cities to the ground, that's okay. But if you're a January 6th protester and you want to go to the Capitol, that's not okay. So this was largely a media-driven focus.
I totally agree. But since the Democrats and since people will not leave this alone 3.5 years later, I think hindsight's 20/20 quite often. But he truly feels like there's nothing more he could have done to prevent that day.
Well, look, I think nobody wanted to see a poor woman lose her life at the hands of a police officer. Nobody wants to see violence against law enforcement or our elected officials. So, is there always a possibility looking back to say, I could have put a tweet out earlier? Maybe. I don't know if anybody truly understood the extent of what was happening. I didn't. I wasn't there. I do know that it's my understanding that Donald Trump had offered the National Guard for the Capitol, and Nancy Pelosi said no, it wasn't needed, based on the reports that we've now seen. Nancy Pelosi's own daughter videotaped her. She must, think I'm crazy, right? But the reality is, hindsight is 20/20. When you're in the moment of it, sometimes you don't understand or can't fully comprehend what's going on. But I do think when he asked his supporters to go to the Capitol peacefully, that was what was in his heart, was to be peaceful. And he never asked for violence. He doesn't want.
He didn't. And I've said that to 100 people too. He really did not. And people, at the end of the day, I think, my goodness, you have to be a great leader, but have such thick skin to even begin to consider doing this kind of job, because even when people know the facts and can listen back to the sound bites and look at all the tweets, et cetera, they're going to believe what they want to believe. And I do think that is definitely the case with January 6th. Coming off of the debate, which even the Democrats had to admit was an utter debacle, personally, I think Donald Trump had really his best quote unquote performance, because he really stayed calm for the most part, and he didn't go off. Maybe that had something to do with the way that they were handling the microphones, et cetera. What did he say to you after the debate as far as how he felt he did and Joe Biden?
Well, look, I think the one part in the debate which I found funny, and David Portnoy, who I think everyone knows who that is, referenced this, was the one time where Donald Trump was just completely animated wasn't when Joe Biden was attacking him or criticizing him. It was when Joe Biden said he was a 6 handicap. Donald Trump almost used six. I want to love championships. I mean, they're in the middle of a national presidential debate with 50 million people watching, and they want to argue who's a better golfer, right? I mean, that's just, my daughter said, "Dad, what are they talking about?" I said, "I got it."
So did mine.
Right? But look, I think I had the privilege to go to Palm Beach and spend some time with Mr. Trump preparing for this debate. I flew up to the debate on Trump Force One with him. I was with him prior to the debate and then post the debate, and the analysis across the board by every outlet, every media figure, whether they want to admit or not, was It was a historic performance from Donald Trump. They're going to look back on that, and it's going to remind people of the Nixon JFK debate, where these two candidates on television just look completely different. Joe Biden literally was drooling on himself. And I believe if he didn't have a podium, he probably would have walked off the stage because he didn't really know where he was. And it was a sharp contrast. Donald Trump was measured. He was resolved. He was articulate. He spoke in complete sentences. And he could stand for all 45 minutes. I know Joe had to practice standing for all 45 minutes, but, this is really what the media's expectation was. And then the media, after they saw that Joe Biden absolutely lost this debate, said, well, Donald Trump lied. I said, oh, like when Joe Biden said he had the endorsement of Customs and Border Patrol, or that no military individuals were killed on his watch, right? So they even...
By the way, real quick, when the Border Patrol then immediately jumped on Twitter, like during the debate, and was like, no. It was just, you honestly, you can't make this up. And I mean, if you're which you are, we're all watching from afar with what the Democrats are doing and how they are handling it. What can you compare this to? None of us have seen anything like this in our lifetime, where you have the commander-in-chief, the leader of the free world, who is not well. Like, honestly, the human element of this breaks my heart. I've never voted for Joe Biden, never have, never will. But that human element breaks my heart. Like, what can you compare this to, Cory, as far as what we are witnessing in our country right now at the top?
Well, what we know is we've been lied to for years. Kamala Harris and members of the administration and the media have told us that Joe Biden is sharp and articulate and spot on and doesn't need a nap and remembers everything. The American people have now seen it firsthand. And let me say this, I didn't vote for Joe Biden. I want him to be successful because I want my country to be successful. But when they say he has early onset of Alzheimer's or something, and I'm not a physician, there's nothing early about it. He's 82 years old. It's not like he's 50 years old and can't remember these things. This is squarely at the age where people who have mental deficiencies have those deficiencies. The difference is he's the leader of the free world. At his urgency, at his decision-making, he can completely and fundamentally change the way this world looks by sending troops somewhere or making a decision that impacts everybody in the world. And I don't think anybody in America watched that debate and said, we think Joe Biden's going to be better if he's reelected and does this for another 4 years. So I think the media is at fault. I think the Democrats, I think Biden's family is at fault here. They have hidden this for a long time. And,
Yes.
and the media that covers the White House every day should be held accountable because they told us that Joe was sharp and articulate and smart and at the top of his game. And we now know that that's not the truth. And the American people deserve better. Even if you don't like Donald Trump, even if you don't like him at all, you don't like the brash nature of how he delivers things, nobody says he's not mentally capable of doing this
Right.
job. And at this point, I think the Democrats have to give it serious consideration if Joe Biden should stay on this ticket or not.
I feel like they already are. I mean, you have Democrats coming out across the country who are saying enough is enough. So the problem is, what do they do? Because the alternative at this point is Kamala Harris. And I think there's a reason why she's been kind of buried in the basement over the last several months, because they know that she is not the answer. As far as the election itself, listen, there are a lot of people like me who don't trust the system, especially after 2020. And I know Lara Trump and the RNC you guys have done a lot of things to try to combat some of the cheating that many people believe took place in 2020, from hundreds of thousands of extra volunteers at polling places to 500 attorneys stationed at polling places across the country. You're doing what you can. As a voter, you tell me, why should I have faith in this system this time around?
Well, look, we should have enormous amounts of trepidation in the system, to be very honest with you. We saw what took place. I was in Philadelphia the day after the 2020 election, where I watched them separate the ballots from the envelopes so that you could never question who actually voted. I had a judge's order in my hand that gave me permission to go into the Philadelphia Convention Center. And the Philadelphia sheriffs told me if I crossed through the magnetometers, I'd spend 3 days in a Philadelphia prison, which I chose not to, because jail's not really fun, by the way, in case anyone was wondering. Okay. So, I think here's what it is. There's only so much you can do. And you have to rely on the integrity of the system, which means every person who goes there has to make sure that what they're witnessing is honest and has integrity to it. When I go to my local polling location in New Hampshire, where I live, I show them my identification. They make me prove to the street I live on, and then they hand me my ballot. It should not be, it's not racist. It's not misogynistic. It's not bigotry to ask a person for their identification to vote in an election. And this notion that now in some states, like Massachusetts, where they give driver's licenses to people who are not legal, that they can then use those to vote in a federal election should be absolutely wrong. It's against the law. And we have to make sure, and look, I don't think Donald Trump realistically thinks he's going to be winning Massachusetts. I'm not saying that, but across the board, it's not just relying on the RNC and the 500 attorneys and the thousands of volunteers. It's every person in this country should care that only legal citizens are allowed to vote and that each person only gets one vote. And if we don't do that, that's what our entire republic is based on.
Yeah, I don't know. To me, I don't even think that there should be early voting. I think it's absentee for the traditional reasons, military, et cetera. If you want to make it a national holiday and to make sure that, everybody can indeed and doesn't have to leave work, I think that that's one of the biggest problems is the ability to go early and then in some cases early and often. As far as the RNC, the convention coming up at Pfizer Forum in Milwaukee, 50,000 plus people strong, millions watching on TV. Tell me what that process has been like for you as you and your team prepare for something that is really, really going to be, again, different from anything I think we've seen before.
I think it's going to be historic. Historically, the Republican nominee comes out on Thursday and gives their speech. But if anybody remembers back to 2016 and I was there, Donald Trump came every single day. I had the opportunity to talk to America Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, without giving away what the president's going to do. I think you're going to see something more similar to 2016 than you did to the Romney 2012. You're also going to see at this convention the opportunity for Republicans to highlight the vast diversity of thought leaders that we have, from strong Republican women to Hispanics, to African Americans, to Asian Americans, to white males across the board. Nobody is monolithic in their voting. And we have members of the Republican Party who believe in the sanctity of life. And we have those who think that they should have the right to choose when they can and cannot have an abortion. And so, look, this is an opportunity for everybody to look at the Republican Party and say, the party of smaller government, lower taxes, and less regulation is what I want for my country. I want a safety and security so that my kids who live on the south side of Chicago don't get shot every day. And I want a closed border so that we don't have illegals coming in here and killing Americans. If that's what you want, big picture, holistic view, you want to be supporting the Republicans. And we're going to be able to demonstrate that next week in Milwaukee. It's going to be a show of shows. Look, we've had everybody from Dana White speak there to household names to people who no one's ever heard of before who've got amazing stories. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that come next week.
Finally, obviously tensions across this country are quite high. And maybe of more importance, something that I don't think is being reported enough, is what's going on in military bases and how there's high alert. There's so many security warnings and concerns on our military bases overseas. That said, security precautions. What are you all doing to try to ensure safety, not just for the politicians themselves who will be there and Donald Trump, et cetera, but for all of those people, 50,000 people in Milwaukee who will be coming to watch this? Security has got to be an issue.
Look, it's something that we've been working on very closely for a long time. We've worked with the Secret Service. There is a designated free speech area, which we have asked to move back to outside the buffer zone so that protesters have their right to have free speech, which is what they're entitled to.
Yes.
But we have to make sure that the people who are coming, those people who are attendees, have the opportunity to be in a safe, secure environment for them. So they're going to come through magnetometers when they come on to, what is called kind of the secured bubble area. They'll go through magnetometers again when they come into the arena. There's a vast open area. If you've ever been to a baseball game or a football game that has the vendors outside or in the close proximity to the stadium, that's what we're going to have. So if people want to go and drink beer or use vendors or, spend time before they ever get into the arena, they'll have the opportunity to do that. We are encouraging people to use the designated transportation tools that are available to them so people aren't driving in. There is going to be Uber and Lyft pickup locations, but they're fairly limited. And when you've got 40 or 50,000 people you're moving around, you have to remember those people are going to be stressed as well, trying to pick up as many people and bring them back to their location. So we're asking all of the attendees, clear plastic bags. Don't bring anything that is a prohibited item through the magnetometers. Baseball bats, umbrellas, baseballs, things like that are all going to be precluded. It's like going through an airport. We're going to make sure everyone has a safe environment. It's going to be a lot of fun. There's going to be music. I think Kid Rock is coming. I think, we've got John Rich coming. We've got all kinds of great activities for people to really enjoy this. And it's going to remind people 20, 30, 40 years from now that they were at the convention that nominated Donald Trump, who went on to have a historic presidency.
Final question, Cory. You were right there front and center in 2015, 2016, and now in 2024. Who is Donald Trump today versus then?
Oh, Donald Trump is, I say this with as much admiration as I possibly can. He is so much more sophisticated as a politician, as an operative in 2024 than he ever was in 2016. 2016, he was an incredible businessman, a New York Times bestselling author, obviously a television personality, but he was new to the political scene. I think what Donald Trump has learned over these years running for office and then serving as the presidency is that just because someone tells you something doesn't mean it's true. We've seen this with, I use the air quotes, friends up on Capitol Hill who say that they're here to help you and only they stab you in the back. The great thing about me is I'm not a backstabber, I'm a front stabber. So if I'm coming at you, it's like a freight train coming. I always say, look, you can see me coming from a mile away because I don't pretend to be somebody I'm not. Too many people get around Donald Trump and either want to be yes men and just tell him every idea that he has is the greatest idea, or they lie to his face and then turn around and stab him in the back, which we've seen elected officials and some of his former cabinet members and people who serve in the administration have done. So, look, I think Donald Trump is so much more sophisticated now. He's more in tune to the way Washington works. And I think when he steps into the Oval Office again on January 20th of 2025, if you believe it, it's going to be a very different administration that has the opportunity to get things done very quickly. And if Capitol Hill doesn't want to work with him, he's going to go directly to the American people and get his agenda done.
I should end on this, actually. I forgot. So right now you said that your role is just preparing and getting you through the Republican National Convention. You just said when he wins and takes the Oval Office next January 2025, what will your role be then?
Look, if I'm fortunate enough to continue to be a friend of the president, I'm going to stay on the outside. I don't want to go into the government. The government service isn't for me. It's just there's so many rules and regulations, as you guys probably know. I'm not a great rule follower. So I try and do my own thing. So, look, I spent 4 years when he was the president to being the senior advisor on the outside to both the president and to Mike Pence. I was the only person in America who traveled with both of those individuals as an advisor to both of them. It was a great honor, an incredible honor to do that. I would love to be able to do that again, to not be a lobbyist, to not be someone who wants to make money off the president, who can just get on the airplane on Air Force One, which, by the way, is absolutely incredible if you've never been on it. It's just, an amazing piece of equipment. You can call anybody, call mom. I call mom all the time from the plane, which is really cool because they say, this is Air Force One operator, please hold for a call.
Oh my
right?
gosh.
Yeah, it's incredible. Your mother's like, what are you talking about? Right? It's just incredible. So, but look, when you can do those things and travel and most importantly, be honest with the president, because there are so few people when you get in that Oval Office and he sits behind the resolute desk and he asks you a question, there are so few people who are willing to actually tell him the truth for fear of either being shunned or fired. You can't fire me. I've already been fired. Yeah, I don't care anymore, right? I just do what I want to do. And so having an honest, open, candid relationship with the president when he wins again is the role I'd love to continue to have.
Well, listen, I am really grateful for your time. I should point out, Cory stepped away from the beach to do this, to talk to me here on the show. So I so appreciate it. I hope you're enjoying it and saving up your energy because you're going to need it in Milwaukee over the next week or so.
It's going to be great. Thank you so much for having me. The beach is right outside these windows. I'll be back there in moments. So come up and enjoy it. It's beautiful today. And we'll have a great time in Milwaukee.
Thank you so much. It's great to officially meet you. And I will talk to you soon, I'm sure. Thanks, Cory.
Thank you.